All right. Anyways, hi, we're on. And hi, everybody. You're listening to Paranormal, and I am your host, Rachel. And then we also have the other host, Kaz. Not much going on. It's another week. It's March break. For those who don't know, I wish I was off. It's so sad.
It really is. And I mean, at least the weather's nice, so the kids could go out and do stuff this time. But
play in the mud. Play in the mud.
Well, we still have snow here, so they can play in the slush. That's about it.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, other than that, I really don't think there's much going on.
We're just preparing.
Yeah.
For things that are coming up. And we've been going through some evidence of things saying, what? Yeah. Some things already into the like sauce, apparently.
Yeah. Our Wildwood investigation's got some pretty interesting stuff from when we went in November.
Yeah.
We gotta yeah, well, we gotta look more closely at it first before we share with anybody, because we don't want to be like, oh my gosh, look, we got something, and then it be completely,
But this is like the second or even third time now that we've come across a piece of footage that we're like, what the F? And we've shown multiple people on the team and they're like, what the F? And then we're like, okay, could it be this? No. Like we've gone through pretty much all the logical explanations. And we just keep circling back to it's
what the F?
Yes, exactly. So, and now this new one that you've come across, it's like, oh my God.
I know. It's crazy. It's crazy. And we'll have to wait till our round 3 to figure this out, because it's getting figured out, because my brain will not be able to comprehend not figuring it out.
I know. And we're so fortunate to be able to go back because of this fact. Like, I think too many people just jump to, oh, it's a ghost. But until we've really been able to set the cameras back up again, go outside, explore, flash flashlights around, even though no one was out there, or at least just check out the landscape.
Yeah.
Until we can fully go through all of the things that could potentially be it and write them off, we can't say it's paranormal.
No.
Even though, like, the one video we have, we're like, like it looks identical to one of the nurses that used to be there.
Yeah.
But
and even when I went for the second round in February, I even like walked past the window, I shone the light, I like did so many things, and I was like, nope, still can't see this reflection, this same type of reflection. So yeah, definitely interesting. And the owner also said it looked like a nurse. So
yeah, it's really tricky to debunk a figure that's dressed in like an early 1900s nurse's uniform, identical to what they wore there, and it turns and walks away. When we're turning and walking the opposite direction, it's very hard to debunk. But we'll go back and try just to make sure.
It's weird. Speaking of road trips.
Yes.
Today's episode is all about road tripping to Kingston, Ontario. Now, I've been to Kingston like hundreds of times. I love it. It's like I don't know, every year I'm drawn to Kingston, and I always do the same things over and over and over. And I would just keep doing it over and over and over. I don't know, Kingston. I don't know. Maybe I had a past life in Kingston. I don't know.
Maybe.
But I'm drawn to it every year.
Well, I used to, for many, many moons, pretty much from spring to late fall, I would go there because my ex had family there, and we would go there and spend time in the cottage. But we were always going north. So all the stuff we're about to talk about pretty much happens down by the lake, which was not where I was.
No, you were away from all the fun stuff.
So it was really great to research this, because now I'm like, I think we're legit going for a road trip, and that road trip is going to have to happen soon, because If you're watching us on YouTube, which I hope you are, and you can see the background behind me, this is of one of the things we're about to talk about. And I cannot wait. Yeah. Like I can't wait to go see them.
So a lot of the stuff that we're going to like suggest and talk about today, some of it is you can go there for free. It's just public space. Some of them you have to pay for tours and then, or to spend the night or whatever, dinner, drinks, whatever. But we highly recommend all of these places to visit because why not? It's Kingston and it's haunted and it's great. And there's lots of history. So I guess I'll go first because I'm pretty sure I have the most places, but you got the ones with the best information.
Well, I hope so.
So okay. So let's go to Kingston. So first stop, the Cataraqui Cemetery. Now you could spend the entire day here. This place is massive. It is huge. And we've only like gone through a small portion of it. Like I've walked through some of it. So let me get my notes here. All right. So it is a non-dominational cemetery. It was founded in 1850. So it predates Canadian Confederation. And it continues to be an active burial ground. It is 91 acres. Yeah. 91 acres of dead people.
91 acres.
91 acres with rolling wooded terrain, ponds, and water courses.
It sounds like heaven to me.
It's very pretty.
Yes.
That's why we need to go. Yeah. Because like I said, we've only walked through a small portion. And then when we went with Ryan and Liz one year, so Ryan who is our team member and then Liz is his wife, we just drove through a portion of it. We only walked a little bit and then we drove kind of through the rest. But like, yeah, you really need some time there. Mm-hmm. More than 46,000 individuals are interred within the grounds. And it is the final resting place of many prominent Canadians, including Canada's first Prime Minister, Sir John A. Macdonald.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So the cemetery also includes notable people such as other politicians, businessmen, humanitarians, and authors. It also contains war graves of 61 service personnel from World War I and 84 from World War II. Queen's University, which is the post-secondary education that's out there, they actually own a section that is reserved for interring the remains of those who have dedicated their body to education and research.
Oh,
so that's pretty cool. So once they're done with them, they bury them in this portion of the cemetery. So there's like a whole bunch of like interesting people buried there, and they have little plaques or bigger plaques, I should say, like in certain areas where certain like families are buried to let you know who they are. So like the Sir John A. Macdonald has a plaque to say that he's buried there with this person and this person, this person, and who he was in life. And then like over a bit, they've got another plaque for another person who's buried, like their family plot. It's kind of cool. There's no evidence that the cemetery is haunted, but it is a very interesting and beautiful place to visit. And it kind of brings everything together when you go out to like all of these other places, like throughout Kingston. So that is pretty cool. Plus, it also kind of connects to one of the other places I'll talk about later on, because people from there were brought to here. I know. I know.
Nice little segue.
So that's, the Cataraqui Cemetery. And it's really cool because there is a trolley tour that goes through Kingston, and they do like, historical sightseeing, but they also have a ghost and mysteries trolley tour. And this trolley tour will actually take you into the cemetery. And when I took the tour, they took you into the cemetery and they stop and they let you get out for like 15, 20 minutes and walk around.
Wow, that's unheard of. Most of the time they're like whipping through stuff.
Keep your hands and your legs in the trolley.
Exactly. Oh, that's awesome.
Oh yeah. So that's Cataraqui.
I'm definitely excited to go there. I love a good cemetery.
I know. That's why you really like this one. So,
well, I'm going to start with the big boy, which is the Kingston Penitentiary, also called the Kingston Pen. This is located basically right at Lake Ontario. It is 48,000 square feet. It is on 100 acres of property. It is Canada's oldest prison, oldest maximum security prison. It originally opened in 1835 and was in operation right up to 2013, which is insanely, 12 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Did I math that right? Yes, I did.
Yeah.
At the time of opening, it was open to anyone and everyone. In fact, one of the youngest people to be incarcerated there were 8 years old. It eventually separated into just a men's prison, and the female prison was in a building that was across and down the street. Now, this is interesting. So when I Googled the capacity, it said it had 154 cells and the capacity to house 564 inmates. However, in its early days, it would have anywhere from 700 to 900 inmates. They would just pack them in. And when you realize that the cells were only about 8 feet deep by 6.7 inches high, that's not very big. So they're like cram-bamming people in there. At first, it just had, this is amazing, a 12-foot high wooden picket fence that surrounded the outside. And then in 1845, towers and stock walls and a north gate were placed. And then, of course, bricks and limestone were placed there, so it became a little more fortified, so people couldn't do much. Famous people to visit the prison: Charles Dickens in 1842 and Ernest Hemingway. I don't know when he visited, didn't give a time, but both of them were like, this is a barbaric and fantastical place. Canada knows how to take care of their inmates. Jesus. So in 1954, there was a 2-hour-long riot which broke out involving 900 inmates. So that must have been when they were at capacity. Because I'm like, how can you say it can only have 564 and then there's 900 inmates?
Mm-hmm.
But there we go. Massive. It was the worst in the history at that point in time. It began over a morning basketball game. Of course, it was. A guard was attacked by several inmates. Then they started setting fires, and basically all hell broke loose. Mm-hmm. Over $2 million in damage occurred, which in the 1950s was exorbitant amounts of money. 160 Canadian Army troops and a squad of RCMP were called in. The 50 ringleaders were captured and then placed in solitary. Dun, dun, dun. In 1971, there was another riot led by prison barber Billy Knight. It lasted for 4 days and did result in the death of 2 inmates. Those 2 inmates were Brian Enser, who was a known child molester, and Bertland Robert, who was known to have killed his 5 children. So it was definitely a directed attack. There were other attacks about to be held out or carried out. And then the members were basically incarcerated, or they were already incarcerated. They were captured, is what I meant. But 6 of the officers were held captive for an undisclosed amount of time, but they were released unharmed. So that's good. In 1923, Norman Red Ryan carried out an escape with several other inmates. They set a fire in a shed as a distraction and then used a ladder to go over the wall. They fled in a stolen car. There was nothing that said if they were ever found or captured again. But then in 1947, 3 other men also climbed the wall using a ladder. Okay, where are these ladders that they're getting that they're just climbing over the wall? I don't even know. 2 of the men were captured, but one of the other men was never caught and lived the rest of his days a free man, apparently, selling giant ladders. That would be amazing.
Ladder business.
That was his job. Amazing. And then in 1999, Tai Khan escaped and eluded capture for weeks. He was eventually surrounded, and he fatally shot himself while on the phone with the CBC producer.
So they say.
Yes, there's a lot of controversy around him, right?
Mm.
Yes. But either way, So, in regards to deaths that happened in the prison, it was really hard for me to find a number. And I found some information. So from 1835 to 1915, there were logs that were kept every year of inmate deaths. Between those years, there was 605 deaths. I know, it was a lot. Since that date, there have only been 48 reported deaths. Now, there is indication that the high rate of deaths during those times, from like sort of early 1800s to early 1900s, is because there were poor sewer drainage, there was infection that was going around, there's overcrowding. It was just generally a cesspool of shit. They weren't very well taken care of. So it was just not very clean and not very well maintained. So likely when people came in, they were already sick. It would spread like wildfire and people would die. Now, interestingly, if a convict's body wasn't claimed within 24 hours, they were handed over to the medical society. So some of them weren't even reported because they weren't ever, isn't that awful? They weren't ever claimed.
So the Queen students just got them.
Exactly.
They
so
became
they were
cadavers.
in that cemetery somewhere.
Yeah.
Not to mention that some of the names were misspelled. Some of the inmates, when they came in, had alias names. So those names were never existed. So there's a lot of discussion over, what happened there. Then the way they reported deaths, if that's what you want to call it, changed. And suddenly we went from 605 to only 48. I don't know if that's entirely true or not. But Kingston Penitentiary is in the top 5 penitentiaries of most reported inmate deaths in Canada. It might even be North America. So that's like, that's pretty bad. The top 5. So I don't know if they were like, let's just not report this stuff because we've got in trouble. Who knows? But there were at least 7 reported staff member deaths. And some of those are the ones that still apparently haunt the jail to this time. So I'm going to read them out. I'm not going to read out the all 605 inmates. I could have, because I did find their information, but I'm not going to do it. So the first was William Wentworth. So in November 1961, he was a guard. He was doing the midnight shift, which was not his usual shift. In fact, he didn't want to do it, but he was, I think, covering for a friend. He was halfway through his shift when he was stabbed to death. The assailant was never found, but his poor lifeless body was. And unfortunately, he died, obviously. Number 2 was Malcolm Earl Jenkins. In 1926, he was also a guard. He was killed while supervising a crew of inmates. He was clobbered over the head by an inmate, Thomas Makowski, who was later hung for his murder. John J. McCormick in 1936, also a guard, stabbed to death by an inmate, Chester Crossley, who was awaiting treatment at the hospital. Chester was sentenced to death with his execution date to be December 6, 1937, but on November 2nd, he was found mysteriously dead in his cell. No questions asked. Not one of the 48 deaths, I'm sure. So then John D. Kennedy, 1948, he was also a guard. He was shot during the escape of 2 inmates. Henry Trailey, 1870, was a guard. He was attacked and killed during an escape attempt. He was also clobbered over the head and then had his carotid arteries severed.
Oh my gosh. That's awful.
Yeah. David Cunningham, 1890. He was a mason instructor. He was killed in an accident during construction. This is pretty awful. So a wheelbarrow full of bricks fell from the 3rd floor and crushed David to death. I don't know why that's funny. It's not at all.
That's us being at the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah. He literally was like, let me show you how to do this, boys. And then,
oh my God.
And then the last guy, Joseph Purcell, who's a guard, this is in 1919. So he was helping till the fields, I guess. They were farming at that time. And the horses that they were using, because, this is back in the day, the horses went crazy. And this says it all. He was trying to save the equipment so that it wasn't expensive. He grabbed the reins, got dragged, and then the horses freaked out again and ran the other way and trampled him to death. I know. All because he was trying to save government property. Lesson number 1.
Don't do it.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So a couple of these, I think William Wentworth is seen quite often in the Regional Treatment Center. And there is another gentleman, I can't remember which one he is, that seems to be seen a lot. The most famous ghost is George Hewell. He was an inmate. He was a notorious dickhead, apparently. He gave everyone a lot of trouble. And so he was killed by a guard in 1897. I think he was just trying to start a riot, basically. He was just instigating some stuff. And he started a scuffle, and the guard was like, let's take him out. And they did. But other than seeing George mostly, I think that's the one that most people say, lots of jingling of keys are heard. Shadow figures are seen at the end of hallways, orbs, disembodied voices, cell doors opening, closing, or the sounds of them. And just a general feeling of like being followed or watched, which I can imagine. I mean, if you see the picture behind me, I feel like I'm being watched, and there it's just a picture. So what's your experience? Because you've been there. I know we don't want to say too much because we want people to go. But
yeah, so I went there like as soon as they do tours now. They only were going to do tours for a certain amount of time, and then they realized how popular they were, so they continuing to do it. So we went like the first year that they did tours, and it was just like a basic tour. And then the next, as the years went on, they started doing basic tours and extended tours. So we started going on the extended ones, which takes you to like all over. I highly recommend the extended tour if you have the time and the money. But yeah, no, we walked in the first time and I had the Ovilus in my purse, and the tour guide was talking, and I could hear like some other voice, and I was like, what the fuck is that? The Ovilus had turned itself on and was saying words from my purse. So my purse was talking while this poor tour guide was going on. But then we also went through solitary confinement because they take you through there. And somebody touched my butt. I was the last person because I'm that type of person because I'd already done the tour once before. So I already kind of knew what they were going to talk about. So I let people go, like other people on the tour, to go ahead of me, because at least now I can like look around more because I already know what the guy's going to say. I'm paying attention to what he's saying, but I'm not. Right. I'm more like looking around now to look at all like the things that I may have missed the first 3 times. 5 times. I don't know how many times now. And I was the last person, and some just full on right on the side. And I was like, whoop. Yeah.
Wow. Was it hard? Like
it was,
like
you could slap. Well, it was, if it was, everyone would have heard it, but no, but it was like full hand on. Like, it was like, yeah, it was definitely something else, but yeah. Strange things throughout the entire, like you feel it, like you can feel in certain areas where things are a little more heavier, And it's really funny. So when you do the tour, once you come into the big portion of the prison, you stop in Gen Pot. So it's, where everybody went who wasn't really a threat, right? And it's 2 levels, so they have cells on the top and cells on the bottom. And Allison and I had already done this tour before, so we were standing back. We were there with Ryan and Liz. Can't take Ryan anywhere. We'll just say that. So Allison looks at me. She goes, "I just saw a shadow come out of cell 17 at the very back, which is like in the darkest part because there's no light back there." And she's like, "So she's watching it, right?" And of course, like I said, you can't take Ryan anywhere. Ryan and the person that works there, because so you have your tour guides, which are usually university students, but they have former correctional officers that worked there.
Yes, I love that.
You, like, when you stop at certain places, they tell you certain things and they tell you about their experiences and stuff because they know firsthand. And of course, Ryan starts talking to this guy, and Ryan is a retired police officer. Nobody has known or knows that from the Paranormal Seekers. And it just so happened that all of a sudden him and this correctional officer are talking about 17 on the 2nd level. And the guy who was in there was somebody Ryan had interviewed a whole bunch of times for stuff. He was, yeah. So I don't really want to give too much away because I don't know if they'll talk about it, but the guy was, he was a murderer, and he did murder some police officers. So yeah, and then of course, Ryan relays this information, and Allison starts freaking out because she just saw this shadow come out of 17, which to her meant that that person was like, yeah, it was really interesting. And then that was the same tour that halfway through the tour we were coming back down, and some correction officer goes, "I have to stop you guys." And we're like, "What?" He's like, "Buddy over there, the other guy, he wants to know what cologne you're wearing because it smells really good."
What?
This was to Ryan, but he was too scared to ask you, Ryan. So I had to come over here and ask you what you're wearing. Yes.
Oh,
yes.
He was getting
he was getting hit on by other correctional officers.
Okay, then. Wow.
We love it. We love it. But yeah, no.
Wow.
It's a place you need to visit. It is a place you need to visit. Now, if you're going to go and think you're going to hear about recent stuff, wipe that, because they're not going to tell you anything recent. So you want to know where certain people stayed while they are in there, they ain't going to tell you.
Yeah. I purposely left out notoriously famous ones because I don't think they should have any notoriety. I don't need to say their names or why they were there or whatever else, because they are pieces of poo.
Yeah, and they don't talk about that either. So we have this thing here in Canada that's like the 100-year rule when it comes to corrections, and they can't release any information about individuals for like 100 years. So you'll never get anything. You'll only get stuff from like 100 years ago if you're lucky. Except for Ty Khan, he was all over the news, so it's a little obvious. But that's a whole different story. That could be a whole different podcast.
No kidding.
So,
well, that's funny that Ryan got hit on. Good for him.
We had a correctional officer chase him down, ask him why he smelled so good.
Maybe they were trying to touch his bum and accidentally got yours.
That was a different tour, but you never know.
Oh, never mind.
Well, speaking of, if we're going to keep on with the whole jail thing, so we have the Frontenac County Courthouse, which is also the old Frontenac Jail. So this is on just off of Sydenham Street, so it's kind of like in the old section. So it's on the north edge of City Park. Yeah, it's called City Park. So behind the Frontenac County Courthouse once stood the gallows of the city courthouse and jail. So this is for like, I want to say like your minor offenses and then your gallows, right? Because if you were like convicted, you went to the pen. So the courthouse and jail were built in 1857. Any inmate sentenced to death in Kingston was taken to the Frontenac County Jail, like the courthouse, for their execution. All right. 5 bodies. Five of those who were executed were buried on site below the jail yard.
Nice.
They just dug a hole and threw you in. All right. So though the courthouse still exists, there is like nothing behind the courthouse other than a parking lot that shows you that the prison was even there. There is I believe the jailer's house is still there. Like you can tell because it's got the bars on the window, but that's pretty much it. The inside is completely renovated, so it would look nothing like it used to.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. It's pretty cool. Local historians actually believe that it is possible that human remains still lie beneath the site.
No shit. I would think so.
But their exact location, they just don't know. There's documented evidence of only one of the bodies that were buried there being disinterred in 1972 and then reburied at Cataraqui Cemetery.
Oh,
yeah.
There we go.
Yeah. So the jail that was there for 118 years. It consisted of a single cell block and a yard with a 2-story wall around it, which really isn't that tall when you think about it.
No.
The execution room in the jail had doors that would swing open during a hanging so the public could watch.
Delightful. Come on, kids.
Literally hanging. They had a hanging there. And I really don't want to talk too much because they do talk about this on the Haunted Walk. But they had a hanging there where they advertised it and they had boatloads, like literally, I'm not joking, boatloads of people come over to view it. Now, across the street is a house that looks like a castle. And then next to that is actually the Hochelaga Inn where I've stayed. But that's a different story. But across the street, there is this castle-looking house. And I think it was for sale a couple of years ago, and they wanted like $5 million for it. But the original owner built a room at the top for his wife that is like glass, like all around. It was a viewing room because it had a view right into the courtyard, like right to where the executions would be. So they didn't have to go anywhere. They just went upstairs to watch.
Nothing says I love you like building a glass room for your loved one so she can watch people being murdered.
That was what you did at the time. That was a family outing. That was like going to Wonderland nowadays.
like anyone that says chivalry is dead, it is, because who's building their loved ones that anymore? No one.
Yeah, disgusting. I need a glass viewing death room.
Exactly. You got me chocolates and flowers. God. You don't know me at all.
Anyway,
I want a view of the massacres.
Oh my gosh.
So now there's nothing left there? Like just the parking lot?
It's a parking lot. And the courthouse is still there, but it's just a parking lot. Free parking on weekends. But anyways, there are plenty of ghost stories for the surrounding area. And one of those ghost stories is a man who is seen standing up against the prison wall on a full moon. If you look at him a little closely or get a close look, you will notice that he's pale and he has a noose around his neck. And if you try to approach him, he just poof, gone. Goes away, vanishes.
Wow.
They don't know who he is. So yeah.
I see.
Yeah, that's disappearing noose man. I don't know.
That's pretty terrifying, though. If you'd be like, what does that guy do? What is around his neck? Boom, gone.
Can you just imagine just going for a nightly walk? Because it's literally in a like an old like subdivision area. The houses are beautiful, like literally, like. And just can you imagine just walking by a parking lot and seeing some pale dude with a noose around his neck, and then he just disappears?
Bizarre. Now, can you still go into the courthouse? Is that like still an old historic
It is
building?
an operating courthouse, as far as I know.
Oh, it's still. Okay. Very, very interesting.
I know. Isn't that one cool?
Well, I'll take us right to the fort. We can talk about that. Because that actually has ties in with the courthouse. So here we go. So Fort Henry, Kingston, Ontario. It is the top of Point Henry, which is named after Henry Hamilton, who was the former Lieutenant Governor of Quebec. Interesting. Construction started during the war in 1812 to protect Kingston's Royal Navy dockyard. A much larger fort replaced it in the 1830s. So 1832 to 1837 is when the fort that you now see was completed. In 1843, an advanced battery overlooking the Lake of Ontario was completed. British troops housed there from 1813 to 1870. That's a long time. And then the Canadian militia took over in 1891. Temporarily held prisoners from 1837 to 1838. So mostly these prisoners were prisoners of war. They were Germans, Australians, Turkish, and some Ukrainian immigrants, it says. Brutal. During the Second World War, so we're talking 1939 to 1945, it served as a prisoner of war camp. 1938, Fort Henry became a living museum. So uniformed military guards would conduct demonstrations for the public. That's bizarre, but okay. Since then, it has been designated as a National Historic Site. And so it's now become basically what you would go and see. The visitor center is 10,000 square feet. It sits 30 meters above the water level. Casemated fort walls are 10 meters high and 2 meters thick. Masonry walled dry ditch is 15 meters wide and 7 meters high. The advanced battery is 300 feet long. It's 9 meters wide, and it has 9 guns stationed along its top to defend the south branch. The west and east branch ditches are 9 meters wide. The west and east ditch towers are 13 meters high, 9 meters in diameter, and they're all made of limestone. Limestones used to be quite popular in Kingston. I'm guessing it's
called the Limestone City.
Yes. So each of these ditch towers were topped with cannons. I didn't go too much in detail about the whole place because it's one of those you got to go and see it, or even just Google how impressive it is, and then you'll want to go see it. But let's talk about the ghosts. So, most prisoners were hung outside of the military wall, and I believe they were hung at the courthouse gallows. That's where I believe it said that they were hung. Niels von Schrautz. Butchered that name. He was hung for treason. So he was a Swedish military officer. He was executed in 1838. He is often seen sitting in a chair by the East officers' quarters. But there is also a man called the Wandering Man in Blue who is noticeably seen wandering around the barracks itself, and they sometimes attribute that to being him as well. A lot of Canadian soldiers died from poor conditions and heat exhaustion. In fact, a lot of them, it was very strict there, especially in the early days. If they were caught drinking too much, they were then made to march in the open sun wearing a big fur coat for hours at a time, and most of them would die of heat exhaustion. Seems a bit much. Like these are your soldiers, and you're killing them off because they had a bit to drink. But anyways, Canada. In 1837, John Gunner Smith died by mishandling his gun. He is often spotted in the West Dry Ditch because apparently. So when they say mishandling his gun, I think they mean one of the big guns that were on top of the advanced battery, because it says He was mishandling it, and it went off, and he was blasted across and over the wall and landed in the ditch. So I'm assuming it was one of them. I don't think he was talking about his rifle, because that would be one hell of a kickback.
No, I think it was a rifle. I have the information somewhere.
Well, I was assuming it was one of the big ones, but if you are fucking around with your rifle and it blasts you over the wall, Jesus. So again, lots of loud footsteps, especially in the hallways. There's lots of moving objects in this place, opening and closing of doors, disembodied voices, strange lights, and often the feeling of being touched. So I don't know that you get to go into all of the fort. You do? Okay. Because it seemed to just indicate you were just kind of in the visitor center, and then you just walked around the perimeter. No. But
you get to go into some places. So Haunted Walks does do their tour, so you get to go into some pretty dark corners. I have been there twice overnight. First time was an investigation with the Paranormal Seekers. We actually had the fort. This is before Ghost Hunters, so we got to investigate the fort. We had 3 rules: stay out of the gunpowder room, stay out of where the personal lockers are, and watch out for the skunk. The last one was more terrifying.
I was going to say, that would be the scariest part for me.
That is literally all we had. Those were our rules for the night. So they do have security. Like, it's still there.
Was this before it was like really popular to go walk around, or was this recently?
This in 2007.
Okay. So decades ago.
Yeah. So like it was insane. Like Joel, I had like these opportunities have been fantastic. We didn't like sleep over that night. We were out of there at like, I don't know, 2 or 3, 4 o'clock in the morning or something like that. But yeah, it was really, we didn't really have much. Paula did capture a really strange like blue light, like a blue orb in the middle of the parade square, which is the big open space. In the fort. But other than that, we didn't really have much. Jay actually was describing, like he could see, like he kept calling them soldiers in the red coats, which is, yeah, he kept seeing them like walking in the dry ditch, which is around the fort. And he was, I think I have one of his drawings somewhere of what he drew the jacket of what he was seeing, which is pretty much identical to what they would have worn back then. So that's that. Second time I went was for Fort Fright. So they do, or they used to, I don't know, I think they brought it back. But they did like this, like, you know, Fort Fright, they did like scary, like jump scares and stuff like that. But you also had the opportunity, if you booked, to spend the night. So there was a room for 4 people, a room for 2 people, and a room for like 16 people. Of course, we had like 16 people. I went with friends, right? Like this had nothing to do with me. I just went. You got to sleep on those wrought iron cots.
Oh gosh.
It was like straight, like basic, but they allowed us to walk around and investigate. Obviously, of course, people invited me because they damn well knew what I did. And then they knew I had equipment, so of course that was brought. But I was the only one that slept that night. I don't know. It was me. I don't know why.
What a surprise.
But yeah, so nothing happened. I still remember though the first time that we went, like we investigated that one time. They have a mascot. I don't know if they still do. Last time I went, I didn't see it, which was 2 years ago. No, I went last year as well. But they had a goat for a mascot, and it was in the corner in its stall. And I walked up, and it went, "Meh," and it scared the shit out of me.
Wow.
Yeah. But yeah, there's some really interesting stuff that happens there. I'm not gonna lie.
It sounds very interesting. I am looking forward to go there.
It is. And you know what? It's so funny because I have been to Fort Henry a whole handful of times. And 2 years ago was the first time I went during the day. Because I was like, wow, this is what it looks like during the day. There's people here in unified costumes. and stuff. And oh my God, this is what it looks like when there's living people here. Yeah, it was really funny.
Wow.
And your gallows, some of them were hung, I believe, there, but your actual gallows were like way to the east, like east. So if you were to go up to the top and look east over the parking lot, they had gallows over there for stuff. But yeah, I also think it's interesting that when it was a POW camp in the 40s, 30s, 40s, it was known as Camp 31 and Bowmanville is Camp 30, right? So
yeah,
pretty cool,
I didn't know that.
History lesson.
Yes. We should try and get into Camp 30.
I don't even know who owns it.
It's the city. It's basically historic now. They finally deemed it as that. It's just trying to get funding to redo it.
I was in it years ago because it used to be my school.
What?
It was a Catholic high school. Don't ask.
All of the buildings?
Don't ask. Yeah.
I won't.
We're talking 90s, 1990s. Yeah, don't ask.
Wow.
But anyway, speaking of forts and stuff, let's talk about the Murney Tower.
Okay.
So prior to the tower, there was a wood fort from the War of 1812 that stood on its site. So Murney Tower, I think, is a little closer to inland Kingston. After the war, the barracks were used as a hospital until the tower was built. So the tower was constructed in 1846 as part of the new naval defenses authorized for Kingston Harbor by the Imperial government during the Oregon Crisis of 1845 to 46. Whatever that is. Didn't know we had an Oregon Crisis. Just thought everybody died of, I'm going to say it right this time, dysentery.
Good job.
Okay, it was one of the last British works of defense commenced in the Canadian interior and one of the most sophisticated of all of the Martello towers built in British North America. So if you notice, if you go to Kingston, there's a whole bunch of towers, little round, they look like silos with red roofs. Those are Martello towers. Although in regular use as a barracks, after 1849, it was not fully armed until 1862, when it had already become obsolete because of rapid advance in military technology. So so despite their relatively small size, these little towers were pretty good at preventing attacking ships from landing. Didn't know. They're super tiny little towers. So in addition to the top, which is a gun platform, the tower also had two levels on the inside. They had a barracks level where soldiers would sleep, and a basement which consisted of a series of storerooms and 4 caponiers that extended outward from the tower, which are little gun things where people could shoot from. And that was so that soldiers could shoot to protect the tower's dry ditch. Although the Murney Tower was never needed in combat, it never sat empty. The tower was used for decades as a barracks for soldiers and their families, first by the Royal Canadian Rifle Regiment of the British Army. So that was from 1848 to 1870. And then later by the Canadian Militia from 1871 to 1885. So at one point, 6 families lived inside together.
Wow.
And if you see
big enough for that,
if you see the size of this, you'll be like, 6 families?
Yeah.
This role changed when the building was taken over by the militia, and then it was used to house one single military family. So it went from 6 families to 1.
That sounds right.
It was this building was abandoned, so this tower was abandoned in 1885 by the militia. It remained unused for decades, and then it just fell into disrepair. So in 1921, a storm came into the area, blew a piece of the tower's roof off, which killed a young boy. Just doesn't say how, just it killed him. But yeah, so this little tower here, there's apparitions of men, women, and children have been seen. And there's also a white mist inside the building that is seen with the naked eye, but never captured on camera.
How crafty.
This is one museum, one place that I've never been in Kingston. I see it all the time when I go. I've just never been in.
Well, when we do our road trip.
I know. Oh, no.
Very cool. And while we're on our road trip, maybe we should take a little spin with the Haunted Walk tours. Now, the Haunted Walk tours got started in 1995. I didn't realize that they started so late. They did. These talented storytellers will guide you on a walk filled with spine-tingling tales of terror. You'll hear all the secrets of haunted hotels, hidden burial grounds, tales of grave robbers, hear the horrors of hangings at the courthouse, and discover who or what haunts Kingston's famous courtyard. Now, the great thing about the haunted walks is that they are family friendly, so they're perfect for any age. They offer haunted walks with unforgettable paranormal tales. There's no boring history lessons. So I've been on quite a few different haunted walks at various places. I haven't been on a haunted walk through the Haunted Walk. That's actually the name of the company. And most of them, you just stand there and you stare at the building, and they're so boring and droll. And it's a bunch of information that you're like, just tell me about the ghosts, man. These people are not like that at all. So it's pure thrills and chills as you are expertly guided through the streets of Kingston, explaining as they go all the spine-tingling tales of the area. And so not only do you get a history lesson along the way, it's done in such a way that it's exciting and thrilling and kind of links to the next, to the next, to the next. Now, this is a walking tour, so be prepared and wear comfortable shoes. It is mostly accessible for the main part, but sometimes construction pops up and they can't do much about that, but they do try to accommodate as best they can. It is dog friendly, as long as your dog is friendly, and as long as you keep it on a leash. All of their walks are about 75 minutes. These are for, general groups, but they do offer private tours as well, which is nice. The general ones are about $29.99 for 14 plus. You can go onto their website. So just Google The Haunted Walk and it will come up. They have more than one location too. So after you've been to Kingston, you can pretty much go to any major city and you'll find a haunted walk tour that is there. And they've recently, it's not really recently, but recently to us, have a Haunted Talks podcast. So it's called the Haunted Talks podcast. It's hosted by Jim Dean, and each episode explores the paranormal, dark history, creepy ghost stories, and much more. New episodes are released each month, and you can find them on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, etc. I highly, highly recommend going on their tours. I would say they were probably the best tour guides that you will get out there, especially in regards to getting true information and facts. The unfortunate part about a lot of tours that you go on is they embellish or just fabricate information, which is never good. So you can trust that the Haunted Walk have accurate information and are very knowledgeable. And each person that you get, so there's more than one storyteller, they're kind of like little actors, right? So it's not just a board, like some people can just be really monotone when they're telling the story. These people get dressed up, they're in character. It's a really great time. It's well worth the money, and we highly, highly recommend that you do the tours. And they're going to take you to a bunch of places that you might not know about along the way. And if you like some of the places that you see on the tour, then you can go back and investigate or explore them individually afterwards. But start out by listening to their podcast, which is Haunted Talks podcast.
Great. And I've been on, I think I've been on not all of their tours, most of their tours in Kingston. I've done the one in Ottawa, and I have done the one in Toronto, and like I love the Kingston ones. They're just I love them. They're great.
They come up top on most of the Google searches that I was doing.
Yeah,
was constantly
and like you're saying, like the guys who do like the leading and stuff, like they literally are actors. Like they will storytell, they will do the voice, like they will get into it. You know, it's really, really good. They're just we've had some really good ones.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like totally worth it. I know they say family friendly, and yes, family friendly. Just if you're going to bring your kids, just make sure your kids understand the difference between real life paranormal and Hollywood paranormal, because there's a really big difference. And just make sure that they understand, because there might be a lot of questions afterwards that you can't answer, or you're not, comfortable answering from your kids. Just make sure that they understand before they go, especially if they're really young. Right. So like I said, we went to the Fort Henry walk a few years ago, and there were some young kids there, and they were literally terrified.
Oh my gosh.
Not like 30 minutes in, these kids were terrified. So, and they were like 7 and like 9. So like, just make sure your kids understand. Right? Or you're going to have to answer some tough questions from them. But highly recommend Haunted Walk.
Yeah.
But speaking of Haunted Walk, I'm going to go through a couple of things you might see on Haunted Walks, but I'm not going to really go into much, because we really want you to go on this Haunted Walk. So there's a place within the downtown called Rushlow Court. It takes its name from Francois Xavier Rushlow, who was a prominent member of Kingston's 19th century elite. So he was, up there. He made his presence known both figuratively, cultivating a strong community by constructing several buildings. Apparently, I'm not allowed to talk about this.
Yeah.
In Kingston. Don't worry, I won't be talking much about it. So this is a dark pathway between Princess Street and King Street East that leads to Rushlow Court, where you can find the Toucan and Chez Piggy, which are restaurants. They are located in there, and so are their patios. But it is an area that is also rumored to be haunted by the ghost of a woman. So there are different. I think Jay farted and he's smelling himself out, but whatever. All right. Speaking of dying here. All right. Apparently, there's a whole bunch of different stories. But the one that I kept coming up over and over again, and this could just be wrong, it could be right, I don't know. So in 1868, a pregnant woman by the name of Teresa Ignis Beam was murdered by her lover, John Napier, in the pathway and buried right there. And apparently her bones are said to still be buried underneath. Her spirit is said to haunt the dark pathway between Princess Street and King Street East to Rushlow Court. And she's been known to ask passerbys for help in finding her bones so that she might finally rest.
Wow.
Many people, from tour participants to just unsuspecting citizens, have unexpectedly come across a woman in the alley wearing old-fashioned clothing who seems to vanish after she turns a corner. This alley is creepy as hell. I will tell you that right now.
You've seen it? Is it like a Jack the Ripper style alleyway?
Oh, yes, it is. So now that I've told you some places to eat, there's actually another place that you can eat, which is the Turnanog or Monty's, which is at the Prince George Hotel, which is downtown, where the Haunted Walks tour comes out of, and that we talked about on a previous podcast. Anyways, they have stuff that happens there. Their food's also delicious, but there's stuff that does still happen in that building too, other than seeing upstairs where the apartments are, but you can eat there too. But now that we're getting closer to nighttime, maybe it's time to go take a bit of a sleepy. So on Sydenham Street, there are 3 historic bed and breakfast inns.
Mm-hmm.
All 3 are haunted. We have stayed at one. So you've got the Hochelaga Inn. I've stayed there twice. It's great. Love it. They have ghosts. They have ghost stories. They're just not too keen on sharing, so it's a little hush-hush.
Mm-hmm.
I have stayed at the Secret Garden Bed and Breakfast Inn. Again, also haunted. Also on an episode of Rescue Mediums.
Ooh,
Yep.
nice.
I had a really, really fucked up experience there. It was just Jay and I. We didn't investigate. Like, we just went because I wanted. It's Kingston. I have a thing with Kingston. I literally had an out-of-body sleep paralysis thing where, that was messed up. That was fudged.
Oh, God.
But the last place that I have yet to stay at that I really want to is the Rose Mountain. Mm-hmm. So this building, this inn, was built in 1850. It is magnificent. When you see it, you'll be like, oh my gosh. It was the family home to English dry goods merchant Edward Hardy. So the Hardy family lived in the front section of the mansion while the servants lived and worked in the back of the house. Mm-hmm. The house remained in the Hardy family for a second generation before passing on to other families. And then the building was turned into apartments. And then the Rosemont took over and opened its doors to guests in 1990. Some of the stuff that was reported is a guest one day woke up in the morning and saw a lady going through her purse. Oh. The lady apparition was looking, it says lady apparition looking for things is a common sight for most of the guests, and many have seen her on the landing looking at the window or reorganizing their things. I know there was a report that she took someone's shoes one day.
This bitch, what's she doing?
I want to stay. Take my shoes.
No. Yeah.
And then also there's been another ghost reported of an old man walking through the rooms with a walking stick.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Beating you if you don't give him your shoes. Wow.
You know when you trip out of nowhere? If you're tripping out of nowhere at the Rosemont, he's just stuck that stick out for you.
I don't know if I should say it on here. Okay, I'll tell you after we get off here. Just because I had a very similar, like, you know, when you're driving and you think of something and then you're like, am I fucked up with my thoughts?
All the time.
So, yeah, I'll tell you afterwards because it's maybe we won't unleash that onto the podcast, people.
But lastly, I saved the best for last.
Ooh.
Because this is something that you only think about in horror stories. Anyways, you have a lovely green space just outside of the downtown core that is known as McBurney Park. That's what it's called. But to locals, and on Google Maps, it's called Skeleton Park.
Oh, okay.
Well, it wasn't always a park. It started as the upper burial ground in 1819. Uh-huh. This cemetery was Kingston's primary burial ground until 1850, when Cataraqui Cemetery was built, like when it opened. So the upper burial ground cemetery closed in 1864 after reaching capacity. Oh. It was full.
Reaching capacity.
I didn't know there was a capacity.
I didn't know.
So after the cemetery closed, there was no maintenance on the site and the area fell into disrepair. People let their livestock graze through the stones, through the grounds, and locals vandalized the gravestones. Okay. In the late 1880s, a growing residential area surrounding the old cemetery put pressure on the city to do something about what was going on out of their windows. So city officials then decided to just build a park on top of the cemetery. So,
of course, what of a solution could there be?
Right solution.
Yeah.
So the various denominations who had buried their dead on the ground started removing the bodies, but it became a very futile process. The exhumation of these bodies was a grotesque situation because many of the bodies hadn't decomposed. Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah.
So were they moving them to that new big cemetery?
They were moving them to Cataraqui. Yeah. So Kingston has very shallow soil with a layer of bedrock beneath it. So the bodies were buried closer to the surface because of that, because obviously you can't dig into bedrock. The ground's high level of water retention also prevented bodies from decaying properly. Okay. So cholera, diphtheria, and typhus were rampant in the early 1800s in the area, and the diseases are the suspected cause of a lot of the deaths of those who were buried in upper burial ground, or what is now known as Skeleton Park. The community obviously feared that these viruses were contagious when the bodies were dug up, and they also didn't want to disturb the graves. So a lot of it stopped. So this is at the point where the city realized that there were no way they could properly reinter all of the bodies.
Yeah.
So what they did was they essentially left it as a mass grave, and that is now the base of the park. Yeah.
So as little John is sliding down the slide, he just lands on a body.
Oh,
perfect.
There is an estimated
over by the cholera people. Jesus Christ!
High five that little skeleton hand on the way by. No.
Exactly.
There is an estimated 10,000 bodies buried there.
What?
Only a small number of them were removed at the expense of their families. So once that was all said and done, the tombstones were laid flat and everything was covered with dirt and grass seed to erase once was there. They just right on top of it built the park up. Every so often, especially this time of year, when the spring thaw happens, tombstones will resurface.
Ooh,
occasionally, a bone or two will make it to the
what?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. It is quite an interesting place. So
we're still going there and having a picnic.
You still have a picnic with your ancestors. Grandma's still buried there. No.
So did they like put more dirt on top, or if you go and you just casually like dig down, like what if your dog's like,
oh no, there have been reports of dogs digging up femurs.
Oh my god. I would get a dog just to take one there, and I would dig and be like, oh, the dog dug it up.
And here's the other thing too, like if you go visit, like it is surrounded by it's an old residential area, but it's surrounded by houses. Mm-hmm. They actually think the cemetery is quite larger because people in these houses have found bones on their property. And they have dug up bones on their property. Wow. And stuff. And, back in the day, like, you're talking like 1900 and stuff. And the kids playing at the park would find these old tombstones and lay them out like baseball bases and play a game of baseball and use them as
so they've juggled up all of the graves. You don't even know now.
Yeah, people. Yeah. No idea. There's lots of ghost stories surrounding this park. Tons of them.
Oh, shit. Wow.
Tons of them. So in the 1990s, two students, again, we are in a post-secondary town. So two students moved into a house that was close to the park. One of the students, after dropping off her things at her new apartment, she had to rush to class right away. So when she returned later that night, she found that she had to pass an old graveyard and it was filled with dense fog. She was certain it wasn't there before and she wondered if she was lost, but she did eventually find her apartment just a little way down the street. In the morning, she found that the graveyard was gone and the park was there.
Oh.
Dun, dun, dun. But it's a very cool place.
I'm excited to go see that one. Question, if you dig up bones, do you think you have to, do you just keep them?
Who
do you report them to?
I don't think you have to report them to anybody because it is a known cemetery. You just have to tell city officials that things are resurfacing. That's what I was reading. I was reading that if you find something that you have to just let the city officials know that you found it and it's resurfacing.
Oh, so you could potentially keep it. Say if you went for a picnic and dug up a skull.
I don't know if I'd really want that at that point.
Right.
But the park is cool.
Cholera.
Yeah, you know. Well, if you're not licking it.
2 girls were caught digging up coal. That's how the next pandemic starts.
Oh my gosh, yes. It's our fault, no.
So good.
But yeah,
Wow.
it's a beautiful place. They have placards and everything all around. I found some really, really old pictures that I'm gonna post with this of them digging up the bodies and the cemetery that it used to look like. And to my surprise, the big cemetery, like the huge monument, is actually still there. And I didn't even know that. Yeah, they still have monuments there, like the big monument. Yeah, it's pretty cool. But yeah,
that is. So they didn't do like a Prague where they just put some soil down and then started burying more people on. They were like, this is a capacity. We better build another cemetery.
Yeah. And we're just gonna dig up some people and throw them back in mass grave. That's pretty much what they did. Toss them back in. Whoop, not today, Junior. But yeah.
Wow.
Welcome to Kingston, everybody.
Yes. Oh, I can't wait to go now. Can't wait to go. Let's plan that trip.
Well, we're gonna go. Melts. We're gonna go. But guess what, people? That's Kingston, and that's the end of our podcast. But before we go, we have something really, really cool to tell you. So we get to partner up with Haunted Walk to give you guys a really, really cool experience. Mm-hmm. We have 4 Haunted Walk tickets, so a group of 4 to give away for your next, I know. That's pretty cool. So you and 3 friends, all we are asking you to do, and it's going to run from today's date, so it's going to be March 19th when this airs. So March 19th no, not March 19th, March 16th. Oh my God. I'm like,
I'm just nodding away. I'm like, yeah.
That's a Wednesday. All right, March 16th to March, what is it, 22nd, 23rd, I think is.
23rd, yeah.
I should just look at my calendar. It's right there. Anyways, we're going to draw the winners' names on the 23rd. But you got to like our page, either Facebook or Instagram, no matter. And you got to tag 3 people you would take with you on this haunted walk. I know.
So excited.
So it's going to be fun. So we're going to draw names and then we will post who wins, and we will get your tickets to you. They are good for any tour in Kingston. But we suggest the original haunted walk because it's super awesome.
Absolutely.
But they're all awesome. But yeah, so we're going to do that. And while you are waiting for us to draw your name as the winner, binge watch all of our other past podcasts because there's other places in Kingston that we talked about, and binge listen to all of the Haunted Talks podcasts because they're pretty awesome too. Yeah. They've got some great topics. But yeah, so we are now going to not enjoy March break because we are adults and have to work and
have children.
Yeah, screw those children.
Yeah. Oh God.
We're gonna go plan our own Kingston trip.
Yeah. Sure are.
Yeah. All right. What's next week? Oh,
next week is
101.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. New topic. All right. Have a great week, everybody, and we will talk later. And don't forget,
like and tag 3 friends.
Yeah. And listen to Haunted Talks too.
Yes.
All right. Have a great week, everybody. Bye.
Bye.